Good afternoon, preppers. It seems every day we're getting closer and closer to a nuclear attack, or even worse, some type of full nuclear exchange. It frightens me. How about you? And we picture this dystopian wasteland, Mad Max wasteland that's going to develop because of this. Is that something we can survive? Or even more so, is it something we want to survive? We need to ask this question. The fear of nuclear exchange haunts us. But I will tell you, there is hope. You will see in the end of this video. Stay with me to the end, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. First off, this video is not about surviving the blast or the fire that develops because of that. And it's not about the fallout either. I've made videos about this as well. Instead, it's about overall, as mankind, can we survive? As preppers, can we survive? Can you survive? Is it even possible? Our first instinct is to say, no way, because we have thoughts of some apocalyptic nuclear winter. And a lot of this came from 80s classics like Mad Max or The Day After, The Terminator, all these nuclear movies where you see what it's like afterward. But more so, it's actually not from the movies. It was painted by a group of scientists who did everything they can to actually try to sway the world to get away from nuclear weapons, and they actually pushed their agenda, if you want to put it that way. They're called the TTAPS team, or that's simply just their acronym for their name. They're actually led by Carl Sagan. If you don't know Carl Sagan, he was a renowned astronomer and actually astrophysicist who did everything he could to try to sway humanity instead of simply talking about like astronomy. He always put his 2 cents in. However, what you may not know, he was constantly ridiculed by the true scientific community. We see the same thing today. We have people like Bill Gates, knows nothing about science, and Bill Nye, the science guy. He's not a science guy. He actually, he has a degree in engineering, which is pretty close to science and actually has a lot of science core, but he's not a scientist. I don't know if you know, but Bill Nye was an actor and comedian and actually did a kids show where he actually came out as one of the characters as Bill Nye the Science Guy, and PBS picked that up to make him a regular. Well, that goes figures with PBS as well, doesn't it? So now here he is trying to pose as some kind of scientist, really in reality pushing his agenda and what he views as science, but he actually has no science background at all. And the thing is, when we talk about Bill Nye, while he was getting his degree in engineering, guess who was his mentor? Yep, you guessed it. Carl Sagan. Why in the world is an astronomer mentoring an engineer major? More than likely the engineer wouldn't even be taking an astronomy class, but he did. And because of this, they put out this agenda, Carl Sagan did along with his team, called The Effects of the Atmosphere of a Major Nuclear Exchange. This is the first time we ever heard of the term nuclear winter. In fact, this team coined that term. But you have to understand this was not a science paper. There was no science in it, practically speaking. They got a couple ideas when they looked at some type of weather patterns and stuff and the way sand moves and everything, and they basically put this together. It was a political paper. They were doing what they could to try to make it so the U.S. and Russia would not actually have so many nuclear weapons. But even more than that, you have to understand, Carl Sagan himself was a socialist. He completely went against a lot of the free market ideas that we actually have in the United States. In this paper, the ozone layer would be ripped open, allowing unprotected sun rays to blanket the planet. And if you recall, it was the 80s. Everything was about ozone, hairspray, all this garbage, which turned out to be completely false. Cow farts ripping open the ozone layer. And we actually find that the ozone layer actually has cyclical levels in which it actually will deplete and rebuild back up again naturally. That was the 80s. It was all about ozone. Today, it's the same garbage, but now all about climate change. In addition, from the immense firestorm that would develop from a nuclear detonation, it would result in smoke, soot, and ash that would literally encircle the northern hemisphere of the planet. This is literally from their paper. Surface temperatures would plunge for a few weeks as a consequence, perhaps by as much as 11 to 22 degrees Celsius or 20 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The conditions of semi-darkness, killing frost, and sub-freezing temperatures, combined with high doses of radiation from the fallout, would interrupt plant photosynthesis and could thus destroy much of the Earth's vegetation and animal life. The extreme cold, high radiation, and widespread destruction of industrial, medical, and transportation infrastructures, along with food supplies and crops, would trigger a massive death toll from starvation, exposure, and disease. A nuclear war could thus reduce the Earth's human population to a fraction of its previous members. Wow, that picture they painted is devastating. No wonder we actually have fear from nuclear detonations, right? The problem is, again, they actually practically have no science backing this up. It was highly based on speculation. Since then, there's actually been multiple agencies, both siding with them and independent agencies, bringing this up to see if that truly is the case. The result, in general, all the agencies that are part of Carl Sagan's group are all saying the same thing. Yeah, nuclear winter. And those agencies, like, for example, NASA, they'll all say we'll have a nuclear winter where most of mankind will die. It's all about fear, constant fear. However, studies done by the independent agencies paint a completely different picture. They say it's going to be relatively speaking minimal, and they actually base this on science, things we've actually observed. For example, the year without a summer. Have you heard of this before? Within a few years span in the 1800s, there were massive volcanic eruptions, and they barely nudged the overall temperature. A year without a summer. 1816 is known as the year without a summer because of severe climate abnormalities and caused the average global temperatures to decrease by 1 degree Fahrenheit, less than 1 degree Celsius. Numerous large volcanic eruptions caused this to take place. And they do admit a large nuclear exchange would put far more particulates in the atmosphere, but it would probably correct itself by the following summer. Would there be food problems? Of course. Animal and plant die-offs? Absolutely. But the key is it would be survivable. Now, I think most of the Northern Hemisphere would be on a very tight diet. There'd be a lot of food rationing if that took place, but mankind would survive. For us preppers, I mean, if we actually have some food put away, it's going to make life much easier. And that's the key. That's the point of why we're preppers. So all of these pictures painted that's going to be some horrible winter die-off death of everybody on the planet are far extreme exaggerations. We're not seeing that at all, even with multiple nuclear exchanges taking place. But I don't want to base on anything as far as the food supply goes, and I want to make sure I have enough food. So a couple years of food put away, is that something you have? Because it's something you should be preparing for, because again, things are we're heading in that direction, and time very well because of this could be short. What do you have stocked away? How many years of food do you have stored away?